Okay, cool. So I'm going to share my slides again. So welcome everyone this evening to Women in Code remote Dublin event. We have Sandra and Arthur joining us for a chat in momentarily. Just have a few slides to go through about data science and behavioral science, the great collaboration. And thank you all this evening for joining us. I know there was a wee bit of a meetup. I think it's up, it's okay now, but before I was just frantically looking at meetup with this 500 internal server error, well, because they did a maintenance upgrade and no one would have access to this Zoom Zoom call. So thank you again. I sent a message to everyone. Hopefully everyone received it, and meetup is up. So it's good to see people turning up. So yeah, so Women in Code has been mostly because of COVID has been running a lot of digital remote events. So for us in Women in Code Dublin, we've for some reason, I don't know, for many of you, it's probably the same thing, that it has been people finding extremely busier than the pre-COVID period. And so a lot of the people on the team weren't able to run or host events. So we managed to run one last year. Was it last year or the year before? And this year I really want to run one. When I was talking to Sandra, saying, oh my God, this would be a great, this would be a great topic to talk about. Would you like to be our first Women in Code Dublin event this year, even though it's September now? So this is the agenda. A few slides, then a panel, and then we have some Q&A. You can type your questions into the chat if you don't want to interrupt. I'm sure we'll probably pause if Sandra, Arthur said if people want any questions as well during the panel, because it is a discussion, informal discussion, and we can still have a chat afterwards as well. So yeah, some best practices for the event. If you aren't talking, do mute yourself, just in case there's kind of feedback and things like that. And if you want to turn on your video, feel free to do so. If you don't want to be captured on video because it's been recorded, turn it off. Yeah, so it's all good. I want to let you know that there is a code of conduct, because Women in Code is an inclusive community, and this applies to all of their events and to all the online communities. You can read more about the Women in Code code of conduct on that URL just down there, womencode.com/code of conduct. And if there's anything like an incident report you want to submit, you can submit it via that site, or you can directly email the Dublin team at dublin@womencode.com. The team is myself, Christina, Irene, Shaki, and Laura. We have two new team members, Amanda and Shivangi. I don't know if they're on this evening, but welcome to them to the team. They haven't been fully onboarded yet. They've signed up, and I got in contact with them. I know we had a backlog of people who are interested in joining the team. Apologies for that. So we managed to reply to everyone. So if you're still interested, check your inbox and get in touch with us. And also, if you want to help us out from running workshops or events, or write content and help promote Women in Code and Women in Code Dublin, let us know. Talk to me, or drop us an email. Dublin@womencode.com. So yeah, so our mission is, Women Code's mission is to inspire women to excel in technology careers, and their vision is a world where diverse women are better represented as engineers and leaders in technology. And as you can see, they have 290,000 members worldwide, and as of when I was checking Meetup before I went down, we have over 1,800 Dublin members, which is pretty cool. So thank you. So before COVID, we were doing a lot of in-person events, and these are some of the countries that were us and plus other countries who were running in-person events. And then when COVID hit, a lot of people went remote. We're trying, apart from running around trying to figure out how we're going to do this, many of us end up saying, let's try this remote thing. And I think being able to run remote events makes it more accessible for a lot of other folks who say, oh, we want to talk, how do we do this? And so they, for their chapter, and they start a chapter, and it's fantastic being able to have organizers being making accessible for their speakers and also accessible to people in different countries to even just cross-pollinate speakers. So that's fantastic. Like even now, Arthur is in Barcelona right now. I'm sure there's a few people here if you want to like type in chat like where you're from if you're not based here in Ireland. Yeah, so the you can find a lot of these events at the WWCode.com's website. There's a lot of them there. I was gonna do a screenshot, but the list just kept going, so that's really good because that's plenty of events. If you're missing one, you get to find other interesting kind of subjects to attend. You can join their mailing list, and also if you miss any of the stuff, don't worry. As I said before, like this video will be sent to Women in Code and they'll upload it to YouTube. And so in YouTube, they have a vast number of different types of playlists, from careers to technical topics to like everything. So it's a pretty good resource to go to and check out. So we reached to our main item of the evening is our chat with Sandra Healy and Arthur Lubambo. Is that correct? We'll be it'll be on the topic of data science and behavioral science, the great collaboration, and they're both from Inclusio. Do you want me to leave the slide up, Sandra, Arthur, or do you want me to?
No, I don't think you need the slide, Vicky. It's fine.
All right, okie dokie. I'm gonna stop the share. And yeah, I suppose it would be easier just to spotlight us if we're talking. How do I do a spotlight? Or will I just leave it?
Oh, no, it's okay, Vicky. I think it's probably because we have a small group, so we probably get a better conversation going. I think if
awesome. True.
We get some questions in. Yeah.
Right. I think I'm amongst experts here as well when it comes to hosting events. So so let's start off with the question is, so Sandra and Arthur, tell us about yourself. So I start with Sandra. So tell a little bit about yourself and how did you end up in the role you're in now?
Yeah, and I won't take up too much time because I could spend a lot of time talking about this. I've had a quite a diverse career. So I would have spent 20 years in the telecoms industry working across the UK and Ireland. My roles initially were I was a technical engineer, and then I moved into pre-sales consulting, and then eventually I moved into senior leadership roles. So in my early days, I was designing, architecting, installing global networks, firewalls. So it was essentially I was involved in building parts of the internet many years ago. And I was in telecom, so I've always been in technology. I've always been in the technology side of the house in most companies that I've worked in. And then the last 5 years, I moved into DCU, so Dublin City University. So I went in initially into DCU to develop and deliver the strategy on diversity and inclusion for the university. And then I set up the DCU Centre of Excellence for Diversity and Inclusion. And while I was in the university, myself, Arthur and Deborah, we got together, we applied for Enterprise Ireland Commercialisation funding to build a research, design and build, and then eventually we spun out Inclusio last December. So just to give you a little bit of context as to where Inclusio came from. So when I was in industry, I was heavily involved in diversity and inclusion, but it was mainly on a voluntary basis. And what I realized is that on one side of my work, I had really clear KPIs around how to evidence the impact of the work I was doing in sales and customer delivery and customer experience. And yet here I was doing this very meaningful work in diversity and inclusion with no way to evidence to the organization the impact. And at the time I was studying my master's in organizational psychology. So I was learning that there's lots of science and evidence around all of this. So I set myself a challenge of how I could combine technology, psychology, and the behavioral science and build a software tool that would help organizations bring an evidence-based approach to culture, diversity, and inclusion. So I'll leave it there because you'll be hearing more about that, and I'll hand over to Arthur now.
All right. So first of all, thank you. I'm delighted to be here to participate and contribute. I'm impressed at like the huge impact of the global impact that this organization is having. Like I was like that's amazing how the globalization from the internet make us do an impact like in the whole world in like that. So that's quite good. So I'm talking about myself. I have my background in computer science. I had been working in different areas on the career. I started with games, game development, from tourism, from software for forensic analysis, and also to apply I focused my career like and the studies in the AI part. So then I met Sandra and Deborah, and I was impressed and enthusiastic, like how can we apply AI, machine learning, in something like diversity and inclusion. Like it was quite interesting to see how different areas could be together and make a huge impact in the world. So that's why we are here. So we have developed lots of things in the Inclusio, and I'm looking forward to share more details about that during the call.
That's great, thanks. I think that's how I actually met Sandra, was because I was trying to find someone to talk about diversity inclusion for a whole, I think I had a diversity inclusion kind of workshop, a whole day event. I was looking for speakers and I found you at DCU. I wasn't at DCU. And then that was a number of years ago. And then when I was in my previous role as maker advocate, I was actually based in DCU, and I briefly met, you reached out to me, but then COVID hit and we didn't really get to do much, you know. I think like for the rest of us, we lost a lot of kind of contacts with people along the way in COVID, during the period of COVID. So cool. Yes, so that's I won't tell people about myself. Besides that, I just help run WWCode Dublin. As Sandra said, we can go on all night on all the different hats I'm wearing. So I suppose I'll start off with a question for Sandra is, tell us more about Inclusio.
Yeah, I think, Vicky, because we have a small group here today, what I would say is if anyone has any questions for us as well around a startup, because it's, you know, I know that a lot of people are very interested in moving in that direction. So if there's anything, even, you know, if there's some questions on the startup and what it's like building in a startup, we're only at the very beginning of our journey. I'm happy to answer any questions. So, and hopefully we'll be able to get a good conversation going in the virtual room this evening. Yeah, so Inclusio, as I said, you know, I set out to solve that problem, right? How do we bring a scientific evidence-based approach to something that is intangible, you know, and when we think about culture, culture can be described, I describe it as the collective behaviors of everybody in the organization. And when we think, I don't know if you've heard of Edgar Schein. Edgar Schein is the main man, right, when it comes to culture. And he describes culture as a pattern of basic assumptions that the group has learned as it solved its problems from external adaptation and internal integration. So essentially, what he describes it as, it's a system, it's how we learn, it's a pattern of assumptions that the people around us teach us as we grow and grow up. So if I was to think about like core values, for example, you know, we learn through our family, through our communities, from our school, from social media, lots of different things. As we grow up, we learn about our core values, and we learn about what's good and bad, what's right and wrong, what's desirable, undesirable, acceptable, unacceptable. And essentially what that does then is drives our decision making and our behaviors and how we interact with other people. And that's no different in work, right? So we come into work already coded, if I can use that example, right, with our own values and how we think people should behave and should be. But what happens then is we go into the workplace, and the workplace has their own culture. Like each work environment sets their own culture and their own behaviors and expectations around how they expect people to be in work. And essentially, so that creates the challenge, right? It's intangible. You know, it's the space between things. Culture is not something that exists on its own. It is the way people behave in work. And because of that, that creates the challenge. How do you measure that? How do you bring an evidence-based approach to something that is intangible? And that's what we've done in Inclusio. So what we've done is working with the organizational psychologists in the university, we have identified the scientific metrics and combined them uniquely in a way that brings an evidence-based approach to people and culture in work. So we look at things like belonging, authenticity, psychological safety, job satisfaction, so lots of different things around humans in work. And when we think about culture and the workplace, we see it as a system. And I think that that's where Arthur and I have great fun thinking about how do we combine our expertise. So mine around behavioral science and psychology and people in work, and Arthur in his around how do we get our AI machine to be able to make the right decisions to help people be better people in work. So essentially, just to finish off, what is it? What have we built? So we've built Inclusio is a software. It's a SaaS-based solution. And essentially what we've done is we've come up with gamified and novel approaches to collecting data and collecting information and feedback around culture in the workplace, collecting demographic data, and then driving interactive content for people. So bite-sized nudge content, articles, videos, forums, and things like that. So it's quite, and then as an output of that, we produce analytics reports and dashboards for the organization. And it's all anonymous, just to say that that's really important for us. We're third party, sits outside the organization, and our intention is for everybody to have a voice. And as Arthur said, you know, we're a social impact organization. It is around us, you know, transforming the world of work and creating workplaces that support everybody, no matter what their difference is.
You mentioned I suppose maybe Arthur kind of explain to me what behavioral data science is. Explain to me like a 5-year-old, I suppose.
So the behavioral data science is a new field. It's like if you imagine compared to other fields, it's a really emerging field that is coming from a combination between behavioral science and a computational computing knowledge. So behavioral science, not just like you think like psychology, but like behavioral science in a broad way, like sociology, economics, psychology, and others. Like, but it's not just that. It combines the skills from that and the computing, like AI, statistics, mathematicians. So basically it's how to deal and how to understand better the behaviors of not just humans, but it might be humans, algorithms, or systems, based on data, basically. So we could understand better, like as the whole world now is fully connected, we are creating new data all the time. So it's interesting to see how it affects, and that studied like how it affects the society and how we can know more about that. if you think in a perspective of, if you divide people like in boxes, like behavioral scientists, they would not have the skills to be able to manage with that amount of data, and the people from computing background, they don't have no knowledge about the domain and how it's the how the things how is the society and human aspect of that data. So that's why it was necessary to have this new path that is exactly this combination. So that's quite an interesting thing.
That must be quite a challenge with all this amount of data, especially behavioral, specifically behavioral data itself. Like, how did you kind of use this kind of data, like say for Inclusio, like itself? Because I'm just trying to, like, I'm a data person, so I'm gonna learn every time I go to a data talk, I learn something different. So this is something also different, even though the fundamental is like huge amount of data. How do we like extract and analyze this? But behavioral data is kind of, I say there's like a lot more nuances to it, because this is like human behavior, and as you say, the psychology involved in it as well.
So, like, I think Inclusio, we are in an even more specific place. We are interested in not the general behavior of systems. We are in the context of diversity and inclusion and the workplace. So the things that we build is not just the data itself, but also the way that we collect the data. Like we develop new things to be respectful, respect the privacy. The way that we store the data, we need to keep the privacy, do some steps. The way that we process the data, we are dealing with data as like psychometrics, personalities, and demographic of the people, or experience that the people have done, so have been passed. So we basically we with that data we try to understand the scenario of the organizations. We deal with three layers: the individual, the groups, the teams, and the organization itself, like a bigger group. So basically, we have challenge about to understand the behavior of that individual, teams, and organization, and predict, or to analyze it and understand and give the better actions and interventions that the people can do to have a better place to work, to be like to have a well-being at the workspace.
Well, it looks like there's a question there. Like I have in my head as explaining, for me, it's more like I think my juiciest thing was like, what's the tech behind it? But let's read the question from Mary is, how is the data gathered and quality checked so that it has any kind of statistical validity? I've seen data on gender being gathered at an Irish university so that they could advertise themselves with an Athena Swan badge, but there was no quality in how they collected the data. It was a box ticking exercise that was seen as a bit of a chore by the collectors.
All right, so yeah.
I might start with that one, just because, you know, if I think about my role when I went into DCU, I had essentially three different jobs when I was in there. The first was head of equality, diversity, and inclusion, and my team were actually responsible for delivering the 46 actions that came out of the Athena Swan data collection, essentially. So just to say, from a university perspective, and what we've built in Inclusio is not necessarily how institutions go around collecting data for Athena Swan. And Athena Swan is very much around quantitative and qualitative analysis. And what comes out of it is an action plan that you have to be able to evidence that you've delivered your actions out the other side of it. And what we've done in Inclusio, if I describe it as a layperson and then I hand over to Arthur, what we've done is we have identified the scientific metrics that are peer reviewed, published globally. We've brought them together, tested them, and combined them uniquely. And then we've worked with academics in other universities that help us test the Chromback Alpha and the validity. And then what we also do is, after we've collected the information, we bring that back to our stats experts as well to test and make sure that what we've done is statistically valid, because that's really important. And what we want to be able to do eventually is to be able to publish and advance the field of research in organizational psychology around the insights that we gather around inclusion and culture and people in work.
Yeah.
Arthur?
So I have some points to add. Like we have done lots of efforts, like to have a very interesting UX flow. So we have done lots of tests to analyze and to guarantee like a seamless approach to collect the data and the people feel comfortable. It varies from the way that we collect, the gamified way that we collect, and the language, and lots of aspects. Like there are a huge amount of research and development on that side to be able to, for us to have the best as possible response rates and the quality of data.
And I see there, Vicky, somebody has asked a question around that, the gamification of the data collection. You know, I think one of the key challenges for everybody, whether you're in a university or in any workplace, is survey fatigue, right? I think everybody has experienced that, survey after survey after survey. And even with the best case scenario is your organization does something with that, so it actually has a positive impact. But unfortunately, that's not always the case, right? So what happens is people feel like they're given all this information, they're answering, they're taking the time, and actually nothing is being done. And I think that's probably Mary's point about the Athena Swan piece as well, right? And that's what happens sometimes when organizations are focused on badges and external validation instead of getting their house in order. So from a gamification perspective, one of the key things we started out with was we wanted to build software that people liked to use, right? That was the number one thing. So we had to think about how are we going to do that? So what we did is we worked, and I see Gabriella is on the call here as well. She's our head of UX design. And she was instrumental in a lot of that work around building software that people want to use. So what we did is we worked with organizations like PayPal and Sodexo and AIB and Allianz and many others, testing the user interface. So finding out how long would people stay on it. So that's one of the things that we tested, right? So we use behavioral science nudge, get in, get out. People do not have a half an hour to be hanging around on your app, giving you insights around the culture. So it's 3 to 5 minutes, right? If you don't want to read the articles, you're in and out in 3 minutes. And then it's short interactions over time, right? So that's one aspect of the gamification piece. The other piece then, I would say it's around, like, we randomized it. So that's to Arthur's point, you know, we want to make sure that people are not gaming the answers in any way, which quite often happens when it comes to engagement surveys and traditional ways to collect data. So what we have, there's a huge, there's a randomization happens so that, again, it's that short, maybe 3 to 5 questions each day. And then we're able to bring that back into the AI engine. And then what that drives is targeted, personalized, interactive content. So that's another aspect of the gamification, because it means you're not just reading random things or random content. It's actually based on your context. And if I was to give you an example of that, one of the organizations we're working with at the moment, in the first segment 1, what we found is that psychological safety was low in certain parts of the organization. So for us to go back into segment 2, working with Arthur and his team, we were able to prioritize our development and learning content and manager interventions around, you know, building psychological safety in teams and creating awareness through the forums and the content around psychological safety in the organization. Hopefully that example makes sense.
I think that's great. Thank you. I think with the you mentioned like AI and how like it randomizes, you know, the kind of the interaction with the user. So it's an app that a person goes in and they see either articles, and I think when I spoke to you before, you said it was like some really short quick fire questions. And that is kind of different, you say, so people don't gamify this, so don't game the gamified system. And you mentioned using AI. So I know there's a lot of people thinking about AI and the ethics around this, you know, and especially this is a very sensitive area with diversity inclusion. And the stuff that you're reporting in, as you say, it generates reports, anonymous or otherwise. Like imagine it was a small team and, you know, certain things that happen then might be very specific to you and stuff like that. So like, I think, I suppose kind of what is kind of the ethical AI kind of principles around that, you know, especially when you're collating data. You know, there's one thing is about big huge companies as well, but like in organizations, like I say, like I would be in that department, I would be like, oh, would people know if I answer these questions, and they know that at the results at the end of the day, you know, is it like in the like a whole group kind of, I suppose the results, I suppose I could from so because I know, like in the back of my mind, I'm going like, oh my God, AI is going to be determining kind of the results after it turns true, depending on what I feed back to it, and the whole ethical side of things around AI, which everyone's very sensitive about, especially around the subject matter.
Yeah. Like as you said, we deal with a lot of sensitive data, so we have extra careful in the way that we store and the way that we show the data. We have some protections, lots of protections actually, for that data. So the way that we store is pseudonymized, and like we cannot, even the database like manager, if they open the database, they cannot link any sensitive information with something that is identifiable. So that's one of the key points. So when we need to access that, we have a mechanism to be able to retrieve that and run time and be able to know the data that data belongs to that person, but it's not like stored as that. And like when the data is not necessary anymore for contractual or for things, the data is fully anonymized after that, and there is absolutely no way to retrieve and link anymore to our person. For the reports, we have thresholds for the group size to be able to display that data. So imagine like if you have a small team, that data will not be, that metric or that thing is not be calculated for that group because they are too small. So we have a clear like we have a threshold for quality in terms of if you don't have enough response rate for that particular metric on that group, we don't show because it's not relevant statistically. And we have another thresholds for privacy protection. Even if you have the whole data for that, but the group is too small, we don't show at all that. And it might be not just could be any group about anything. Like if you divide by gender, if the distribution between gender, I give an example. Imagine if you have an organization that have a very small amount of women and a huge amount of men, we will not show the metrics by gender if the number of the non-representative group is too small, because it might break the privacy. So we have a quality check and privacy check in all the metrics that we create and calculate to guarantee that is sensitive. I can talk also more about some other ethical principles in more details.
Yeah. It's when I hear like diversity reports, you see a lot of the kind of big companies when they come out with like, you know, the breakdown, you know, the gender, and then all the different kind of different groups, then they start breaking it down. So I suppose so for us, I just, for me, like in the back of my mind, if I was in a small team, like I would just be like kind of very aware on what I do reply or not reply. So does it happen, you know, that people don't respond, you know, like I suppose like you have how long have, I suppose with Inclusio, we didn't actually say how long had this project been going. So you said you started this back in DCU. So like so when this project started, how long ago was that? So people will know how far this project has progressed, even though the company itself is relatively new, like early stage startup, but the project itself has been you've been working for quite a while.
Yeah, like Vicky, it's 4 years, I think, probably a little bit longer than 4 years since we started. So we would have started out with research. So researching the market, what it is that employers are looking for, what are the challenges around this type of sensitive and protected characteristic data collection for employees. You know, why is there such a disconnect between employers saying they want it for doing good and employees going, well, actually, I don't feel comfortable about giving it to you. So that's where we started. And then what we did, it was when we applied for the Enterprise Ireland funding, what we did is we were able to assemble the team of experts that we would need around us to be able to start really deeply researching what are the challenges around working with this kind of data. And it's interesting, I see Mary asking questions there about, you know, does it limit the usefulness of the findings, right? If all we collected was demographic data, I might say yes. Or if all we collected was data around culture, I might say yes. But because we have built a very comprehensive system that looks at people holistically in work. So what it does, it looks at the humans in work and their relationships to each other, their relationships with their manager and their teams, and their relationships with the organization. So up to now, we've been working with quite large organizations, right? So we haven't had to pare back and compromise on our data collection because we're working with large organizations, you know, with over 1,000 employees, and we're getting exceptional levels of participation because people like using the software and they trust the confidentiality of it. But one of the projects we're working on with a couple of universities now is around developing a version for SME. So when it comes to developing a version for smaller companies, we will have to, as Arthur has described, the rules, right? So if you go in, for example, to the system and you go, there's only 15 people in this company, the system will automatically make that decision around, well, we're not going to ask people that question because that would be identifiable automatically. So your version of Inclusio, for example, would not ask that very sensitive information. However, what would still be really useful is for you to understand what the experience is like for the 15 people in the workplace when it comes to feeling like they belong, when it comes to job satisfaction, when it comes to psychological safety. So even if you only have 10 people in that, they're still really important metrics, right? So you might not have such a level of detailed analysis on your demographics. Although just to say, we do ask questions around things like your hobbies, what you like to do, health behaviors, you know, family status, living arrangements, all of those other things that are not necessarily around very personal things related to sexuality or gender identity or things like that. So, but that's the journey we're on, right? So, Vicky, you're asking how long are we out? We're only out of the university since December. We've actually just closed our funding round last week, so we'll be making an announcement around that soon.
Congrats.
And essentially,
well, hopefully, maybe your announcement come maybe after this video.
Yeah.
Before.
So yeah, so that's the, you know, it's an early journey for us, right? And for us, it is around now, you know, getting the head down now and creating a solution that's, you know, set for the globe. Like that's really what our intention is.
I think it's at a very right time as well, given that, you know, the mental well-being of folks, like with being working from home, like you just hear it everywhere now. People return to the office. How do you feel? Do you want to work from home? It's going to be a mass exodus of people resigning. I'm sure companies would like to know how people are feeling at work. You know, are they going to leg it because they don't offer the work from home option as flexible as, you know, that they can't, or, you know, for some reason or another. So I think it's a great time, especially like you touched on, and in the back of my head is like, you know, this is at the period where everyone just keep asking all these stresses outside, you know, people are just getting their work-life balance, and then all of a sudden we're just being tossed back into the whole commute, back into work, losing hours and getting stressed, and then being stuck in a very cold office because all the windows have to be open. I don't know if people have to come back to work yet, but that's what people are going to be facing. You'd be wearing your jackets indoors. Will you be liking to do that with the rain raining down on you and winter time coming up? So it's kind of, I'm sure, like, you know, companies would be very interested in hearing right at this moment, because it's a very hot topic right now, and how people feel, because, you know, the last thing they want is this kind of rumored mass exodus of people changing jobs or moving away and things like that, because they want to work from home more. I suppose we touched upon that. You just start. You just like Inclusio is now early stage startup, but you started in university. So just for folks here, do you have from your experience, what are the kind of the pros and cons for starting, you know, a technology company that's Inclusio? Just to share for people your experiences and insights.
Yeah, I would say for anybody who's thinking, particularly in tech, and we may get an opportunity to talk about this a little bit further if it was something that people are interested in, is like in Ireland, it's called Enterprise Ireland Commercialisation funding. And essentially that's for if you have an idea and you're outside a university and you want to spin it into the university so that you can tap into the innovators and the expertise and the academic expertise in particular within the university, you can apply for commercialisation funding. Essentially, that fund was set up for academics. Initially, I'm not an academic, right? I was on the professional staff, but for academics to enable them to be able to build an MVP version of their whatever their innovation happened to be, whatever that happened to be. So I would say from that perspective, right, two things there. One, access to funding when you're just at a very early stage of trying to build something that you don't know if it's going to work or not. So that's good. And the second piece then is, you know, I describe it as the ecosystem of the university or the village. You know, Arthur and I had access to people like Professor Alan Smeaton and some of the learning technologists and organizational psychologists. Like when you're in a university, there's such a rich, diverse skill set. You know, like we had some of the world experts in UX and UI design that we were able to tap into that. So like from that perspective, I have to say it was invaluable. But there's, you know, that they're all the pros, right? Some of the cons then is, you know, well, the university have a share in your company, right? So that's that can be a con. Or not. In our case, we have a great working relationship with DCU, so that's a good thing. But that's not always the case for people, right? And the other thing I think is it can be very daunting, right? Spinning out. Because the minute we spun out, we had to start thinking about how are we going to fund ourselves, right? So and that can be very challenging because you're in a university and there's a bit of safety in that. You're not necessarily in the entrepreneur ecosystem. So when we spun out, we had to kind of nearly start all over, you know, building our connections into thinking about how are we going to get funded, you know, what are the different programs as entrepreneurs that we can connect into. And we were in the middle of COVID, right? So you can imagine multiply that difficulty by 10, right? Not being able to get out and meet people. So it was quite challenging. But I would say commercialization is something that I think should be shared wider in Ireland, because if you have an idea, particularly if it's tech related, I think it's a really good option.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so if anyone is thinking of it, I think Sandra has a lot of insights, and so certainly it will be interesting as the journey goes on. See what other stuff. So yes. I see another question from Mary. How challenging was the sales process into big firms?
Yeah, it's interesting, and I think that our time in the university and you know, obviously I had established the DCU Centre of Excellence for Diversity and Inclusion, so I would have a lot of connections in Ireland, in particular in big organisations. I think look, the sales process is going to be challenging no matter who you're going into, but I think one of the things that really has stood to us is the quality of the technology, the quality of how Arthur has described how we've architected and designed the system. Like we have had to get through very rigorous, as you can well imagine, GDPR audits, DPIAs, everything, right? And some of the biggest companies that have come to us, we've managed to get through them. And we have, because right back 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, we knew what we were dealing with. We knew it was protected characteristic data. We knew that we were, we had to be absolutely bulletproof when it came to GDPR legislation and best practice. So we took the time to do that when we were in the university, so that we're able to have, very confident and conversations with those big firms. So it's not just about the sales process, right? I wish it was only about the sales process. It's not, because of the speciality of what we do and the sensitivity of it. We have to have a whole other set of conversations with people in these big organizations. It's not just around sales. Arthur, I don't know if you want to add to that.
There is a huge process after the sales to start the onboarding on Inclusio. That is, talk with the security team. We need to show evidence that we are doing all the best practice in security and anonymity and privacy, and like from the operational things until the most detail about how we protect the data and the practice. So there are a lot of challenges around that, and it's quite challengeable to do it in a small team. Some questionnaires like that they ask us is really done for big corporations and stuff, and to answer that in the startup lens sometimes it's challenging, but like we are doing quite well. So
it's great to hear that you're dealing with a lot of the various different big companies and big names as well. So you must have kind of examples of where you have psychological and behavioral science being used in the workplace. Like, do you have kind of, can you share, are you able to share some of those examples for people here if they're curious?
Yeah, I think I suppose Inclusio is a perfect example of it, right? But for many years we've seen this. Certainly, I think it's called HR tech is probably the best example of it, right? Where we see a lot of companies now are starting to use, and probably over the last 5 years have started to use technology, and some of them use AI around employee things like motivation, employee satisfaction, that kind of thing, and really the driver of it is around productivity. So how can we make sure that we have a highly productive workforce, and what are the different components that we need to consider when it comes to that? I think one of the things that makes us different, really, and I suppose in some ways it's a bit of a brave move, right, from our perspective, is that we deliberately stay outside the organization, right? Because like every day I get asked, every customer I speak to, they go, great, how do you integrate it? We go, well, we don't. And the reason we don't integrate is because through our research, people told us they don't trust the internal reporting systems. They don't trust the confidentiality of what's inside. So for us, if we want to have the maximum impact, we have to be outside. We have to be the people that you can trust to give us the information, and trust that we will bring that back in and represent you in a confidential way, but in a way that's going to impact and steer the action that the organization needs to take. And sometimes when I describe Inclusio, I talk about we built it for the people who don't have a voice. So for the people who are in the minority, who are disconnected, who are silenced, who are outside, because what we wanted was to create a way for everybody equally and equitably to be able to give the feedback and give and be counted, which is really, really important. And maybe in 5 years' time or 3 years' time, people will trust their employers more, and there'll be more trust in the world where people won't mind if Inclusio is integrated. But for the moment, it's not, and very deliberately, it's not for that reason, because we represent employees. That's why we built it.
I got goosebumps when you were talking to that. I think it's fantastic that it is a product. It's just focused on the people, and it's not, because you think of human resources and all that. It's always on the side of the company where you're actually working with the employees, the people who are the people that actually keep the company going. They're not happy, they're not being as productive, And also people might want to, stay and have a career projection, and it affects everything day to day, right up to your life choices. We're like nearly 6:30. So one last question, I suppose, is a very big one, actually. I think either you can answer, like, where do you see the future for ethics, AI, and employee trust? This is like a big one.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
Can you do it in 4 minutes? 3 minutes. It's okay. We run over. It's fine. It's okay.
All right. So for the AI, basically, what is hot in the discussion is to have a clear principles and values to be followed, to be able to cover that. So I'll give an example. Like one of the Australian government, they are already putting in place some principles on that, and then they go from like the human and environment, society, well-being. So the AI, if the AI is built, that's something that is not for that, it's that problem. I will give an example. For instance, I forgot the name of the car brand. The AI team developed something to cheat on the test to pass on pollution emissions. So absolutely,
I know which one you're talking about. It's a German car, right?
Yeah.
So like that's like application of AI that is unethical. For instance, we need to be like human-centered values, so it should respect the human rights, diversity, like so. And all the AI that like attends to the democracy of to like that hurt the minorities and things like it's not good. No, it's not a well user. So we need to keep it on eye. So everything that we do, we need to think how will be the impact. What we'll do with that data or with that thing. Like it's something that is changed for good or not. It's something that we should always be reviewing. Also things about fairness, like we need to be fair. If you apply the AI, like just here my metrics, the F score is being great, yes, that's good. But if you see the data is fully biased and it's not representative, it's not representing gender or ethnicity well, you might be adding on your AI unfair system, unfair way to do so. It's absolutely not good. There are thousands of examples, like from courts support decisions to bank if you approve or not a credit for people. So that's a huge thing. So there are lots of studies, and how can you embed the fairness on the metrics of quality of your modeling of AI. Privacy protections, and like also that I talk a little about that. We need to keep that on mind. Like there are today every month you can see a big list of data leaking and things like that. So if you design your AI system where you need to have the data there explicitly stored, like it's not nice, it's not good. So you need to think in always a way to keep the privacy and preserve that, like not just in the storage level, but also in the application. Reliability and safety, like the things need to work for the proposals. If we are creating something that is start to be used for something else, like for instance, we create social media and they do to connect people, but if you are helping the people to be connected to do something, a crime or something that is not ethical, it's not nice. So it's important if you develop the AI to connect people to be in a good way and be able to detect and I don't know, deal with that scenario. The other thing,
sorry, if I was just to add one, a couple of things to that, right? I think from my perspective, being a psychologist and a human, that the most important thing, there's enough judgment in the world, there's enough exclusion in the world, and there's enough injustice in the world. Technology should be an enabler. And I think that that's where Arthur and I, that's where we come together. That's where Inclusio comes together, is to, and we haven't just built a system and get it out there. Like every single aspect of what we do is considered, our impact is considered, you know, and we're committed to, as Arthur said, the fairness, the no harm for good, you know, AI and tech for good, really, really critical and important for us. So it can be done. So we can't be building machines, and we can't be allowing companies to build machines that are creating more harm in the world, you know.
It's been doing it for years, so, you know,
I know
it's been done for years, so why not try to turn against that trend and do more social good?
Yes.
You know,
that's,
you know.
We like, there are things, the beauty of Inclusio is that like we are helping the people have the good learning, good experience, preserving the privacy, understanding the context of each person. So that's quite powerful, and like that's a mission. Like we need to keep that in mind in all the algorithms that we choose, in everything, to be able to have the human in the center, and we need to change the things for good.
Yes, I think there's just so much. You're kind of touched on tips of everything this evening, and I think like there's a whole kind of, I'm sure there's like different topics that come off that, and for me, I'm very curious about the actual technology underlying and how you went through the kind of the algorithm side of things, and how it could be like maybe we all need to sign NDAs to do it, but even just like, you know, telling us how you use the technology, especially when you kind of analyze the data, and then especially when it comes to AI, because it's I think a lot of people, especially a lot of the events right now, that everyone's interested in data, AI, machine learning, and the ethics around it as well. So isn't it? So like I totally agree with Mary that you have a mammoth task, like you're tackling something huge, and you're trying to do it in a social good, in a tech for good kind of way. So it's kind of amazing. So I would love to see kind of more. Maybe we can actually get some technical kind of topic off you at some stage in the future as well, just to like poke at some of the juice. For me, that's me, my selfishness for an event. So if people want to have some other events and other topics that we on some of the things that touch on, and it kind of spur you and go, oh my God, I want to hear more about that. Let us know. If we can get hold of Sandra and Arthur and their busy schedule, we can arrange something like that in the future as well.
Yeah,
but,
I would be more than happy to
so this is like an introduction of what you're trying to do with Inclusio in this like huge area. And for me, it's kind of very like, I hear data science a lot, but behavioral data science is kind of newish to me. And just tackling that subject matter, especially so sensitive kind of area as well. And then it'd be interesting to hear, kind of poke at some of the more stuff underneath the hood. So I suppose it's we're way past half. I'd like to thank, I suppose it was okay if you have anything else to add. You want to say a few more things, a thing or two before we
just to say, from my own perspective, Vicky, thanks, and we'd be more than happy to come back. Like, I know we're speaking to the converted here, right? And you know, ideally, like the world is only at the very beginning of considering ethics and AI in particular in Europe. I know in some parts of the world we're a little bit further along. But we need people to engage. We need technical people to engage, and psychologists and people who are coming at it from a good place, right? So we need to create that global conversation. We need to keep the conversation going, and so that there isn't more machines built and decisions made that exclude and create judgment around people. So I certainly, anyway, I know Arthur would as well. We'd be delighted to come back again at another point and have a deeper conversation.
So so I'd like to thank Sandra and Arthur for speaking this evening, even though the hour just flew by. If you want to, you both are on LinkedIn as well. Yeah. And so if you want to connect and ask them lots of questions, pick their brains. I definitely would talk to Sandra. I think we talked for a long time. I think it was like a quick call, ended up like we went past lunch and everything, I think, if I remember. So 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 if you want to pick their brains, they're both on LinkedIn. I'll follow up with the post-event message as well as I'll put their LinkedIn profile, LinkedIn kind of profile, so you can, if you want to connect with them. But thank you all this evening for joining us. I know it's halfway through the week, so we're nearly there. So the weekend, I have to say that because I'm very excited, even though I'm part of, just to let you know, I'm part-time, but my actual work day actually starts, I only have like 2 days a week. So I can't complain too much, but I feel for you. I remember what it's like to work you're looking forward to that goal of chilling out. But yeah, thank you again for your insights and all that information. My brain is overloaded, Sandra and Arthur, and everyone else. Yeah, if you have any questions, send them on to me and I can forward on to them, or you can connect them on LinkedIn and pick their brains. So I will wish everyone a very good evening and thank you again. And thank you to your speakers. And I will stop the recording. I will stop the recording now somehow if I know how to stop it.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vicky. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening.